Most of you know that I was just recently in the Holy Land with a tour group from our synod. And in fact, the very first site that we visited was Mount Tabor, which is the traditional site of the Transfiguration. Now, no, we cannot be certain that the Transfiguration, that this event definitely happened there, right? But, we read the Gospels, we do not really have a site named. However, what is pretty clear is that the church that's built on top of Mount Tabor was built on the same location, the foundations, if you will, of a Byzantine church that was built there around between the 4th and 5th centuries. And that Byzantine church was destroyed at some point, but then it was replaced later by a Crusader-era church, which also then was destroyed. And then the current church, which you see here in this photo, current church was built around 1924. And when the Franciscans built it, they actually did archaeology and they could find the earlier buildings in that place, still for us to see today. The artwork in this church, like so many others in the Holy Land, is just beautiful and inspiring. So there's a chapel that is focused on Moses, receiving the commandments, the 10 Commandments. And there's another depicting Elijah in the contest with the priests of Baal, with the sacrifice here being consumed. The sacrifice, not just the sacrifice, but the whole altar and everything being consumed by God. But of course, in the main church, there's a dome, which depicts the Transfiguration itself, with Moses and Elijah and Jesus, and then the 3 disciples to the side. Our ancestors in the faith have visited this site for almost 2,000 years, and we share with them in remembering this event when we stand on that mountain. And we are inspired with them as we remember this story and reflect on Jesus' life and ministry. We can have our own mountaintop experience along with Peter, James, and John like they did so long ago. But mountaintop experiences can happen in other kinds of circumstances too, right? Being filled with awe at seeing the mountains here around Fresno, or maybe looking at a sunset, or being moved by the joy of a child or the unexpected kindness of a friend. Having a piece of music touch your heart in a way that it brings tears to your eyes. In these moments in our lives, the shell of rationality that we put up around ourselves is suddenly broken into by the Spirit. It sneaks through cracks in our armor, and we see God moving in our lives and in our world. But peak experiences are fleeting, right? And though we may want to try to reproduce them again and again, we would find that unfruitful. We are like Peter saying, "Lord, it's good for us to be here. If you wish, I will make 3 dwellings. One for you, one for Moses, one for Elijah. It's going to be great." But in trying to reproduce them, we would miss the point. Instead, the voice from the cloud redirects our attention. "This is my Son, the beloved. With him I'm well pleased. Listen to him." We can't stay on the mountain. What you don't see in my pictures from Mount Tabor is that it was windy and it was cold, and we were happy to get back on the bus. But more than that, even without the cold, we can't stay there. The peak experience is momentary, and then it is gone. The life that God intends for us does not consist of staying there on the peak. That is not the way of living in God's realm. Listen to Jesus. We are given this vision of him in glory so that his words and actions, sometimes so difficult for us to take, can be received with trust. And what he says challenges us. Let's be clear. It really challenges us. Because just before going up on that mountain with Peter, James, and John, and immediately also again, right after coming down the mountain, Jesus told them that he must go to Jerusalem and undergo great suffering at the hands of the elders and the chief priests and scribes and be killed, and on the third day be raised. And not just that, of course. Because as he tells them about his own upcoming suffering, he also tells them about theirs. He says, if any wish to come after me, let them deny themselves and take up their cross and follow me. This is not what we want to hear, right? This is not what we want to hear, and yet the voice from the cloud says loudly to us, listen to him. Jesus came to those first disciples cowering in fear, and with gentle compassion touched them and spoke to them, do not be afraid. But even more importantly, with an eye maybe to his own resurrection, he said first, arise, get up. He says to us even now, be raised up and do not be afraid. God is not just there on the mountaintop in the beauty of that glory, but also in the suffering, in the crucifixion and resurrection. It is the shape of Jesus' life that reveals the truth of the shape of our lives also. And it is not by avoiding the difficult or challenging parts of life that we find fullness in life. No, it is in following Jesus and his way of the cross that is the way of truly living. Listen to Jesus. The mountaintop experience is important, but God is also in the difficult and even mundane parts of this world. In our lives, in our families, in our friends, in our enemies, in our work and play, in our joy and suffering, in the office, in the classroom, even in the parking lot. The Transfiguration helps us see Jesus more clearly and to listen to him, I hope, a little more clearly. But most of all, may it help us see our daily lives and all of creation as they truly are, beloved by God and full of God's glory. We get to live in a God-infused world. So listen to Jesus. Listen to Jesus and keep on listening, because in 3 days we move into the season of Lent, and our call to follow intensifies. But also, remember, be raised up and do not be afraid. Jesus goes with us and promises to raise us up with him.